This isn't the type of headline people scroll past and forget. The situation surrounding Claressa Shields has been portrayed online as something far heavier, unfolding slowly and emotionally in front of the public. What appears to be happening, according to social media discussion and commentary, is the unraveling of a carefully built public image, with personal matters becoming increasingly visible and discussed. What once began as quiet whispers and side conversations has reportedly evolved into something larger, with people sharing screenshots, offering statements, posting opinions, and reacting publicly. Supporters, critics, friends, and observers seem to have all been pulled into the conversation as timelines are debated, actions questioned, and emotions heightened. At the center stands Claressa Shields, celebrated for her strength, discipline, and dominance in the boxing world, someone whose professional identity has always been tied to control, confidence, and resilience. Yet online narratives suggest that her personal life may feel far less steady, with emotional difficulties, shifting trust, and painful challenges now being discussed publicly. Once private matters enter the public space, they stop being personal and become subjects for debate, speculation, and judgment. That loss of privacy is what many believe has made this moment feel so intense and risky. The discussion intensified even further when legal conversations reportedly entered the picture, signaling that the situation may have moved beyond gossip and into serious territory involving statements, reputations, and accountability. Then, according to online claims, a friend came forward publicly with extremely serious allegations, which dramatically escalated the tone of discussion, shifting it from social speculation to something far more sensitive and emotionally charged. Whether accurate or exaggerated, these claims have deeply impacted public perception, leaving many watching closely, aware th. They forced people to stop joking and start questioning reality, because even those who doubted the claims felt uncomfortable reading them, and once certain accusations are spoken aloud, they cannot be unheard. Especially as the relationship drama quickly grew more tangled than a simple love triangle, involving a married man, his wife, an alleged side relationship, a fiancé, and carefully managed public images that began collapsing the moment private messages leaked online, exposing a version of Claressa that seemed emotional, vulnerable, and at times desperate, giving the internet exactly what it always looks for while stripping away context and nuance in favor of the harshest interpretation possible. Shifting the conversation from who was right or wrong to who was lying, who was manipulating the narrative, and who stood to lose the most when everything fell apart, a shift that intensified once Tasha K entered the picture and captions were edited. Statements walked back and apologies issued as lawyers stepped in, because once receipts are mentioned, the damage becomes permanent. Screenshots do not fade, messages do not disappear, and the internet never forgets, turning gossip into exposure. Especially after a formal apology was released correcting a claim deemed legally risky, a moment that quietly signaled that this was no longer entertainment, but a situation being handled behind the scenes by attorneys. As Claressa's entire public identity began to fracture piece by piece, despite the fact that she entered this story not as an influencer chasing attention, but as a world champion who had built her reputation through discipline and sacrifice. Yet the internet does not respect accomplishments when it senses vulnerability, and once her name became linked to Papoose, who was still legally married to Remy Ma, the situation turned volatile because everyone involved had something to protect. Reputation, leverage, and control, forcing honesty into the background. While strangers can exaggerate and enemies can twist facts, but when someone who claims to know your real life speaks publicly, people listen. That is why the allegations connected to Jada hit so hard. These were not petty accusations or gossip. They were deeply serious claims involving exploitation, trauma, and betrayal. Even people who doubted them felt unsettled reading them. Claressa was no longer just a champion facing relationship drama. She had been pulled into a narrative she never agreed to participate in. Suddenly, people were asking uncomfortable questions. If someone knew this for years, why say it now? Was it revenge, anger, or a breaking point after a friendship collapsed? At that moment, The love triangle storyline stopped making sense. Remy and Papoose were still legally married. Both were rumored to have their own situations. Claressa was reportedly engaged. This was no longer about romance. It was about power, image, and positioning. One small moment made that clear, an alleged phone call where a voice was unexpectedly heard, followed by panic and a rushed hang-up. The clip was replayed endlessly until it became symbolic of everything. Then came the leaked messages. Those were especially brutal because they showed how people spoke when they thought no one else was watching. Public reaction turned cruel. Claressa's entire life was reduced to a viral phrase, undefeated in the ring, but lost in love. It spread because it was simple, humiliating, and easy to repeat. That is how viral narratives work. They flatten complicated human lives into a single joke that ignores everything else. Quietly, though, a more dangerous storyline began forming. It was no longer just about relationships. It was about statements that could damage Claressa's career. Claims involving substance use or behavior that could affect her eligibility changed the tone completely. This was no longer commentary. It was potential defamation. That is when Tasha K's role shifted. She was no longer just reacting to drama. She was navigating legal risk. Receipts can destroy reputations, but they can also become evidence. The Hawaii story added fuel to the fire. Claressa was allegedly seen there with Papoose. Another woman claimed she was also present. Remy had already suggested Claressa was not the only one. Whether true or not, the optics were bad. Once the idea that Claressa was one of many took hold, public sympathy evaporated. She was no longer seen as a new partner. She was portrayed as part of a messy situation. Because Papoose was still married, the internet treated it like a joke, but jokes become labels, and labels can be dangerous. Eventually, an apology was issued, acknowledging that calling Claressa someone dating a married man crossed the line. Apologies do not happen when stories are harmless. They happen when consequences are approaching. By then, the damage was already done. Apologies do not erase narratives. They confirm that a boundary was crossed. The situation became truly serious when claims touched Claressa's career and livelihood. The marijuana allegation was especially risky. That was no longer about emotions. It was about rules, testing, and consequences. One test result could change a champion's future. Behind the scenes, teams went into protection mode. Old posts were reviewed. Captions were edited. Screenshots were archived. Lawyers were consulted. Tasha K later clarified that the smoking claim was not true and apologized for allowing it on her platform. Her language was revealing. It focused on legal fees, liability, and financial risk. That moment made everything clear. This was no longer content. It was damage control. The apology felt calculated, not emotional, and viewers noticed. Meanwhile, the internet kept digging. Old interviews resurfaced. Messages were reanalyzed. Every word became a weapon. Claressa's team denied the claims, citing technical explanations and misinformation. That may be true, but public opinion does not wait for investigations. It reacts instantly, especially when someone has already been framed as emotionally vulnerable. The former best friend allegations carried even heavier weight. They did not just embarrass Claressa. They challenged her entire story. If even part of them were true, the implications would be devastating. That is why she stayed mostly silent. Emotional reactions would only make things worse. Silence became strategy. Slowly, the narrative shifted. Instead of asking whether the allegations were true, people began asking why they were shared publicly. Motive replaced truth as the central question. Once motive is questioned, credibility weakens. One interview made this obvious when a speaker warned that Claressa could easily win a lawsuit if she were framed as a victim. That was not a defense. It was a warning. From that point on, the story stopped being about exposure and became about survival. Claressa protected her image. Tasha became legally cautious. Jada grew isolated. Papoose stayed quiet. Remy did not need to speak. Silence became the loudest voice in the room. This is no longer entertainment. When everyone starts protecting themselves at once, the truth rarely comes out clean. The loud phase has passed. What happens next will likely unfold behind closed doors, through lawyers, sealed statements, and conversations the public never hears.